Another challenge that I've noticed with field leaders is that field leaders may not be in their sweet spot or leading out of their strength. Leading a field is really a different skill set than many types of ministries. It's a different gifting.
Buongiorno. You're listening to Going, Where God is at Work, a podcast that sits at the intersection of missions theory and practice. We're walking out our call to ministry in faraway places and happy to have you join us on the journey. I'm your host, Jesse Pauli, a missions leader serving in Rome, and I'm here with Alessandro Di Leonardo, our church planter in Cisterna di Latina, and Jen Williamson, our missiologist who lives and works in Lyon. Good morning, everyone.
Good
How are you
morning.
doing?
Good morning.
It's a rainy day. I don't like rainy days.
Same here.
Same in that it's a rainy day there, or that you don't
Both.
like them either?
Both. I mean, I don't mind them from time to time. I just feel like we've had inordinate amounts of rain. We had a nice sunny week last week, which I was very grateful for. But I just spent 3 weeks in the States. It rained the whole time. Then 2 weeks before I left for the States, it rained the whole time. So I'm sort of over it.
Yeah, I don't like rainy days either, unless it's like the perfect environment. Like you don't have anything to do, so you can sit at home. You can, fridge is stocked, so you can eat food and watch movies and just chill. Like that's a good rainy day. A rainy day where you still have to walk the kids to school and get to work, and
Exactly.
that's not as fun.
Exactly.
I agree. Well, this is, I don't even know what, I think we're on what is it, like our 6th or 7th mini-series? This is the start of what will be one of our last mini-series, I guess, for season 2. And we're going to do this one on field leadership. So most mission organizations designate a person, sometimes a team of people, to a certain area or country to oversee the missionaries that they have, working there on the ground. These people are typically called something like field leaders, and they serve a unique role in missions because, they're overseeing God's people who are doing the work. But before we get into the missiology and theology and all the stuff that the book has to say about field leadership, let's share a personal experience in an organizational context. It could be like a mission organization, but it could be otherwise. Maybe it's a denomination, or maybe it's, previous employer or something. But what qualities do you most appreciate or admire? And maybe you could have someone in mind that might help you think of a quality that you appreciate or admire in a leader.
Well, I can start. I have most appreciated the leaders that can listen through my emotions or my passion to hear the heart of what I'm saying. So, and they've taught me a lot about myself and about how I want to lead as well. So what I mean is sometimes I can come in hot if I really care about something. And there are some leaders who that's all they can see. And they just want to shut that down or reprimand, the approach, which I would agree is inappropriate at times and not the best. But then there's these other leaders who have this capacity to see beyond the way I'm coming, and what they do is they hear what's really at the heart of the issue, and that diffuses my anger or my frustration really quickly so we can get to the heart of the conversation. So there's something about that they have enough self-confidence and self-awareness and willingness to really listen, to understand, that makes them people that are approachable and that I feel safe with and that I want to follow. So that's one quality. Another one, which might sound weird, is I really appreciate people who have their stuff together. So it's hard for me to follow someone who themselves is disorganized, late to appointments, irresponsible with their words, and careless with how they treat people and all of those things. People that are respectful of your time as well, respectful of boundaries, that demonstrate by how they live that they're interested in growing and developing and continually becoming more like Christ themselves. That's very admirable to me and easy to follow.
I'll jump in next because I'm afraid that all of the good qualities will be taken.
Yeah.
Jen, you said exactly what I was thinking. So apart from what she said, I will add, this is more like of a pet peeve for me, but it does reflect a lot with leaders specifically, is good communication. Where specifically if we're trying to get something going, I still have some outstanding messages that people have not responded yet. And like, I'm not to say that I'm somebody, but I'm someone asking something to do something for God, and I'm just getting crickets on the other side. And then, like, we're in the same team. It does not make sense to me. Like, we're not talking about messaging somebody from church. Like, these are leaders, people with titles, right? And so to me, a leader should respond. I don't respond to everything right away, but I respond to everything. I think a leader should have that in the back of his mind. Of course, there are boundaries. There's going to be some people who are a bit overwhelmed and has to decide this and that. But I do think a lot of times these people, either they're a good leader either actually responds or they don't respond. And if it's for me personally, then I'll be like, okay, this is just between me and him. But then you hear that, oh, that person is not responding to other people as well, and you kind of say, well, that's not what kind of person I would want to follow.
Yeah, that's good. The idea of being reachable and responding. Yeah. What I appreciate and look for is like a leader that can see my own blind spots and kind of help me navigate that. I think often of when I think of leadership to the sports world and coaching. And for me, like a good coach sees that. They see the potential in a player that maybe the player himself doesn't quite see. They see kind of where pieces of the team, if they moved a couple guys to different positions or leaders, whatever, they would be able to be more effective. And so like kind of having that, like I look for a leader to be able to know me and be able to see, okay, there's a blind spot. Let me help coach them through like how to navigate that. And then I also, and I think through that, I also appreciate a leader that has had similar experiences, so they can draw from those similar experiences to coach me through those blind spots. Like those are kind of go together, but it's something that we all do. I'm sure we could have reversed the question too and said, what's a trait that you dislike, in a leader, and we'd have examples of those too. But yeah, so we want to talk about field leadership, and Jen, you're currently or you've been a field leader, sorry, and they're in France, and I'm currently a field leader with our mission organization here. Let's just think through what are some of the things that are unique, maybe, to being, a field leader, and we're obviously talking in the world of missions. Yeah. How would you maybe point out some uniqueness there?
Yeah. Well, field leaders, to begin with, are generally similar to mid-level management in a business or an organization, which is really complicated because most leadership books that you read or podcasts or whatever, they're talking about leadership as if the leader is the final decision maker, the one setting organizational direction, the person responsible for hiring and firing and building the team, the one in charge of the calendar and budget and integral and setting all the organizational guidelines and things like that. And actually, most leaders and most organizations aren't the executive leadership. The bulk of us are leading from somewhere in the middle. And field leaders are like that. We're leading from somewhere in the middle, which means we're being asked to implement vision and policy without having a lot of say in what that vision or those policies are. And then we're needing to translate it and lead people who are required to fulfill that vision and mission. And that can be a tricky thing. So there's this balance between demonstrating loyalty to the organization and to the vision and being able to support and be behind that, and advocating for the needs of the people on the field and what's realistic for them and what's really possible for them and what makes sense in their context. It's needing to understand the global vision and what this organization is about and trying to accomplish, but then implementing it locally on the ground. It's needing to uphold that organizational vision while still releasing the gifting and creativity on the team. of the what God's brought to this team and how these people feel called and how the Lord is leading them in their day-to-day lives, and connecting that and figuring out how does that connect with the vision, and where does that work out. And so this needing to lead from the middle is tricky. There's not a lot written about that. There's not a lot of books that address this idea of needing to both lead up and lead down. And yet that's where most leaders are leading from. And on the field, I think that's tricky, because sometimes organizations, we've been on the field since our organization made a major shift in vision. So they had one vision of rapidly reproducing churches, and then they moved to another vision of really focused on discipleship. Well, the same people are on the field during that. And all of a sudden, these missionaries who feel a call on their lives, all of a sudden, are they then going to have to totally shift their mission, their focus? Are they going to have to totally change what they're doing? Is there a way to adapt? Is there a way to accommodate? And these are the kinds of things that field leaders are navigating in real time.
Yeah, no, that's that what you were saying about the I forget how you exactly said it. You said something about like translating I think it was like translating the vision and stuff, and that's like exactly the image I've painted for people. Is like field leadership is like a live translator that's translating for a speaker. Speaker says something, they translate it, then the audience has a question, so then they have to listen to the audience, translate it to the speaker, listen to, like, it's that back and forth in the middle totally. And I think too, some of the risk in that is that you can either tell when someone's trying to just climb the quote unquote structural ladder, a corporate ladder, whatever, in their organization, because they don't necessarily advocate very well for those that they're leading, but they are constantly pressing into what's being casted as a vision for them to share down. Or the opposite, the people that are trying to guard from the direction of the whole mission or the whole organization, and they just kind of are focused only on their team, their people, and taking care of them. Those are kind of two ends of the spectrum where, but the healthy person is holding that tension in the middle of, hey, this is, these are the needs of the people I'm leading. How can we meet them? But also, how can they step in and hold up the vision that we have as an organization? And it's tricky. And I would say you kind of feel in no man's land a lot of times,
Well, and there's that other layer, not to over spiritualize, but we are believers who believe in a God who interacts with us and invites us on mission, where these missionaries have received a call and have a passion for something that God has invited them to participate in. And they're being obedient to God, right? So there's even a sense of duty and a strong sense of call. And sometimes it can feel like a missionary is being forced to choose between allegiance to what an organizational vision is and allegiance to what a God-given call or vision or mission is. And that's where I think, we have to be really careful, because, I think as organizational leaders and executive leadership teams, those teams should be really conscious of the reality that they may have invited these people or mobilized these people to be a part of whatever they're doing. But our hope is that people are on the field because God has called them, and because they're responding to a call of God on their lives. And if we don't respect and honor that, I think we're actually cutting off our nose to spite ourselves, because that's where the Spirit's empowering and moving and giving creativity and gifting. And we want mission organizations that are fostering that and cultivating what God is calling people to and nourishing where the Spirit is leading, not setting boundaries and limitations or restrictions on that.
Yeah, just to kind of speak into maybe something similar, because you guys, the topic is field leadership, and we're talking about a group of missionaries. But this sounds a lot with something that could happen between a church planter who's somewhere else and he's leading a team, a group of other staff. And so there's this idea, like you said, Jesse and Jen, about translating, trying to communicate to the upper denomination ladder, trying to say, this is what we're doing, this is what they're saying. And so definitely there's a lot of similarities. So it's not necessarily just for a missionary group. It could be someone who's planted and has a leadership staff, and it's a lot, maybe not super similar, but definitely a lot of similarities.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I would say, yeah, it's very similar because even, like yourself, Alessandro, you guys are a church that's planted, but your denomination sends you interns, and so you're, the on-field oversight for those interns. But those interns are sent from the denomination, so it's you have that same kind of triangle that
Exactly.
you're working with.
Yeah, so we have that being a leader in the middle. I think another challenge that is common for field leaders is someone that is on my field once said this to me, and it resonated so deeply that I've used it over and over. He said, field leaders are actually leading gymnastic teams, not football teams. And what he was referring to was when you're leading a field, a lot of times your people, it's not like they're all cooperating together on the same project. You have one missionary off here in this city working with anti-sex trafficking, and another missionary off in this city working with university students, and another missionary off in this city doing church planting. And they're kind of, you're all the same team. You all wear the same organizational jersey, but you're doing different things in different locations. Whereas, a football team, you're all kind of on the same field, moving the ball down the field in the same direction, aiming at the same goal. And so what happens is we have all these diverse areas, diverse ministries, diverse skill sets, aiming at diverse outcomes. And it's challenging to establish strategies or training opportunities that apply equally to all the members of your team. At the same time, Jesse, you mentioned something you really appreciate in a leader is someone who has some experience in what they're trying to lead you to do. I'm the same way. But when I'm a field leader, I can't possibly be an expert in all of those things. I'm a church planter, but I didn't know how to help or lead my people who were doing Muslim ministries or who were really focused on university students. And so we have to be able to support our team by outsourcing some of the coaching and equipping that team members need, recognizing I can't be someone who can advise them in some of their ministry areas. I don't have that expertise. So how can I resource them in other ways? And at the same time, needing to figure out what are the unifying factors in order to promote some camaraderie on the team and some sense of unity and fellowship without demanding that everybody be sort of in the same category or in the same lane. So this idea of leading more of a gymnastic team and not a football team, I think, is something that field leaders are constantly juggling.
Yeah, and I personally, because I think there are some mission agencies, some groups that do focus more on just lots of football teams, in a country. But honestly, in our schooling and just listening and knowing ourselves, we were attracted to our organization because there was more of this idea of gymnastic teams versus football teams. And now as the leader, it is hard sometimes to even help others understand how we operate because there are, outsiders. I've had a guy who leads a traditional kind of football, team, and he's like, I don't understand what you guys do. But for us, like, I honestly believe we've maintained the longevity, that we've had on the field and stuff because of this component that, people are able to operate in their giftedness and not be kind of pigeonholed into a certain way of doing missions. But it does bring complexities to leadership for sure. It does make, like you said, it does make my job that much more difficult of saying, okay, how do we bring unity to a group where we're each working in our silos, so to speak, and also how to set expectations for new missionaries is something that I've learned is so important when we have new missionaries coming, helping them understand, that it's a little bit different than a place where you would go and they say, okay, now you're going to be doing X, Y, Z every day, and while we do A, B, C, and the other person's doing D. Like, it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. So one of the ways too that we've seen that in one organization, actually a few organizations I know have created what some call affinity groups or impact groups or whatever, where across the organization, regardless of what field people are on, they have a way of connecting missionaries in similar types of ministries, like missionaries who are all working with university students regardless of what country or field they're in, or missionaries that are all working with artists regardless of what field or what country they're in, to be able to be those experts and coaches to each other and resource each other, taking a little bit of that pressure off of the field leader, and then allowing the field leader to be more of a, directing them, hey, you need to meet with this group, or can you connect with this person for some coaching on your ministry, and I'm here to support you in other ways, organizationally, administratively, pastorally, and that's one way that organizations could help navigate that, I think.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I could imagine that being tough at the beginning. I'm kind of thinking of a early start where you just have sort of like a one layer, like one field leader, and then a bunch of people that are all doing different things. But I could see then as this progresses, and then each group has their own like student ministry. So then you have 6, 7 people. Then out of that, you pick a leader. And so then kind of like some of the more established organizations, I'm thinking here in Italy, like Agape or Cru, where they have different ministries, but each one has a leader. Then with that, a field leader would just have to meet with the leaders, right? That's I'm sort of kind of thinking managerial that way. And so they just have to make sure those leaders are well so they can lead their team. But I think at the beginning, it would be a little bit more tough because you're kind of overseeing what they're doing also. I don't want to use that word overseeing because we're talking about more about
that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean that's a part of leadership.
Yeah, supervisor oversight. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think too this idea of like an organization, the people that minister through sports can connect in a realm, and those that minister through arts have a point of reference, and that's been helpful in different ways for different things. I think for a field leader to be able to recognize, like you were saying, Jen, I'm not going to be an expert in everything, but I might know somebody. Like I can do the work of knowing and networking and being in touch with what's happening in the wider breadth of missions. To be able to say, hey, why don't you connect with that person over there? They might have some good insight or be able to help you with that.
And same with locals. Like that's another role of field leaders too, right? To integrate people into the country. And so that field leader is often that networker with local partners who have not only expertise in certain fields, but also cultural expertise and knowledge and experience. And so connecting people in that direction is also, I think, really helpful thing that field leaders can do. Yeah. So another component, and this is true of church leadership, but it's particular, I think, to religious organizations, is that there's a pastoral component that you don't actually find in secular leadership. So most organizations have moral codes or standards that are important and valuable because they're connected to our faith and how Jesus tells us that we're to live. But they can be tricky to uphold and enforce at an organizational level. So if, say, you're working in an engineering firm and an engineer has an affair or a gambling addiction, his boss might say, hey, you need to not let this affect your work or there's going to be consequences. But a mission leader has to deal with the moral issue as part of the leadership assignment. And this is really tricky business because we're getting into people's business at this point. And so this is where we need field leaders who have a level of integrity and of confidentiality. You know things about people's lives and struggles that you can't share. Even like with me, my husband was also on my team. So he's a team member with other people. So I can't tell him what people on my field are going through or struggling with. So also then this leaves field leaders often feeling isolated, and who can you talk to about these things and these burdens that you're carrying and these struggles that people are going through. So that's a component that I think is also tricky because it's not just strictly business organizational management. There's people's lives at stake here. There's children involved, there's spouses involved, there's family issues, there's financial issues. And as field leaders, we're often called upon to help people, to serve people as they navigate all of these things, and at the same time to hold people accountable to certain moral standards that we're all trying to live up to in ways that are filled with both grace and truth. And that's a challenge.
Yeah, I want to throw in another part of this component that's challenging that I'm running into currently is when you're working with, and I would love to hear Alessandro's thoughts on this, when you're working with locals and national churches, church plants, when you're working with churches, basically, one of the things that I've found to be kind of at odds too in this is like the church wants to be the pastor. The church feels like they should take the pastoral responsibilities and spiritual kind of accountability. I was having a conversation with the local Italian who is an aspiring church planter, and he was sharing with me how he was particularly hurt because some missionaries that they knew that were attending their church had some moral failures, and the mission organization basically said, "Okay, you're no longer fit to be there," and took them away from the church.
Oh, wow.
And
no, I do think the church should have a role to play, so that
yeah,
it's
and he was
tricky
saying
because,
they were taking that church role of pastoring and basically, disciplining this couple, and he thought, like, shouldn't we as the church have been more a part of that than
that's good.
So I do think that there's just an extra layer of complexity there when you talk about the relationship between the organization and their leading of people, and then the churches that these people are part of. I don't know if Alessandro, if you have any thoughts or experiences with that, but
so I have thoughts, not experiences. So I've never had missionaries be at my church except for the interns that are currently at the church plant. I know a lot of churches that have hosted missionaries and missionaries who are going to churches. And so some of the healthy things I've heard is to kind of know what they're getting into the beginning, having that conversation with the church, like what are the expectations? And so not to assume like, well, you're a pastor, you should be pastoring me, or I'm a missionary, I should be able to help out here, right? Like, oh, he's the missionary, let him help out. So like, I think having those healthy expectations, obviously there's then other people we answer to. And so if that mission group, missionaries had to answer and were called back, then that's something. But I think that's the healthy thing to do, is to have a clear expectation. Do you want me to pastor you, or are you just here to kind of to a place to kind of pit stop at the moment? And a pastor could be like, we could do that for 6 months, but obviously if you're going to be here for the long run, people who attend my church, I want a pastor. So I think it's just a communicating what expectations each parties have, including with the mission agency. And that's the one I've seen that's healthy, where they have a conversation with them and say, okay, this is what we are going to do for them. Is that okay? Can we have that sort of oversight over them?
Yeah, I think, but it is tricky because, I mean, I can see the complexity of the issue you brought up, Jesse, because if the missionary is being paid for mission work through raised support, and there's something in their life that requires that they step out of their ministry role and having ministry authority. Like if this happened to a pastor in the States, the pastor, I mean, we've seen it. I in my church growing up, this happened. The pastor can go get a job at Costco or whatever while staying in the church and being restored and having the church pastor him and walk through the moral failure. But if you're in a foreign country and your work is supported through, you don't have usually that option to just get another job and stay in that church. So it's complex. And this is why that field leader spot, again, becomes tricky, because trying to help determine what is right for the kingdom of God, what is right for the organization, what is right for the person involved, what is right for the people that are supporting that person, what is... how do we navigate this, considering that there are all of these considerations we have to make?
Yeah. And I wanted to add, before I forget, Jen, you mentioned the idea of being lonely up at the top. I mean, that's true also for pastors, church planters. What's been super helpful for me is to befriend people outside of your organization that have similar roles.
Exactly.
And then you guys can gossip about, no, not gossip, about discuss and pray about the things that are happening, the good and the bad.
Exactly. And we need those things, those places and those people. That's been really key for me, Alessandro, too, because I need a place to process, I need help navigating some of this stuff. And I have a strong aversion to gossip. Like, I'm very sensitive to issues of confidentiality. And so being able to find those spaces where I can process circumstances without feeling like I'm gossiping about a beloved teammate is really important to me. All right. Another challenge that I've noticed with field leaders is that field leaders may not be in their sweet spot or leading out of their strength. Typically, a field leader is a person that felt the call to missions, demonstrated some level of capacity or success in ministry, and then got, quote unquote, promoted to be a field leader. But leading a field is really a different skill set than many types of ministries. It's a different gifting. And I mean, this is true of, say, the salesperson who's a great salesman who gets promoted to be the manager. Your top salesperson may not be your best manager. Selling something isn't the same thing as serving and equipping and empowering those who are also selling something. So mission orgs tend to be full of people with evangelistic and pastoral gifts, but not necessarily people who have visionary leadership gifts or strategic planning capacity or administrative strengths. So this creates an interesting dynamic. We have a lot of really sweet, lovely people who are leading fields that don't really have capacity for strategic planning, team building, those sorts of things. So from the organizational side, field leaders need specialized training and support. And we can learn some of those skills, even if it's not our gifting. Most of us can learn those skills, but they are skills that have to be taught and practiced and learned. And also, I think mission organizations need to temper their expectations of field leaders and be really clear about what are we asking field leaders to do, and is it realistic, and can some of this administrative stuff be handled by HR, or is there a way to make sure that what field leaders are being asked to do is attainable?
I have a question. Do you guys know of any organization that kind of does a yearly field leader role where they swap, like where they have like 10 different missionaries in the field, and each year it gets swapped, or maybe 2 years they're field leaders and then they give it to somebody else, sort of like when they do like that, this year I'm the president for 2 years, and somebody else. Term moments.
It's something I tried to install in the French field, Alessandro, because that was my vision, because I was called to France to be a missionary, and even as a field leader, I didn't want to take away from what I felt like God called me to do in France. But there's a lot of resistance to that because not many missionaries want to take a turn to lead because they are so committed to their call. And so I also think we need to understand, we say in our family that none of us have the gift of doing the dishes. But guess what? Someone has to do the dishes. So maybe we need to talk about field leadership that way. Like, everybody needs to take a turn, and it's an important role. It needs to be done. There's value in it. Let's have realistic expectations from the organization. And I think sharing it would be a great idea. The challenge with it too, though, is you learn a lot as you start doing it, and then those skills, aren't automatically transferred to the next person. And so then you're always having someone who's constantly in that learning curve. And that's the downside of that model.
For sure. There's some logistics that is hard. Even the relational equity you build with networking with partners and stuff, it's kind of hard to transfer that if the person, for example, is at the other side of the country. So it's hard for you to, be able to bring them along and meet the people.
Exactly. Yeah.
So those things can be complicated. The other thing that I think is a complicating factor with that is the idea that, like what Jen was saying, like the information, how do you get all that? Like, you have to be well organized. Everything needs to be kind of written somewhere that they can refer back. It's just, it becomes messy, but it would be interesting. I think the analogy I thought of when you were asking the question, Alessandro, was if you know how to drive, and then your wife knows how to drive, and your 20-year-old son knows how to drive, and your 16-year-old daughter just got her pink slip to be able to learn how to drive. Do you each take a turn on the road trip? How much time do you give to I think it becomes a little bit one of those situations where, yeah, you could probably pass it on, but it's like steering a big ship or something. It could be a little dangerous to give it to someone who's too new or too not prepared. No, this is really good. These are some good things that you've given us to think about too, about the differences that field leaders have to face, some of the different uniqueness. Are there any more, Jed, that you want to add?
I would just say, and this is true of any leader, but I think we have to be especially attuned to that in Christian organizations, is that field leaders need to be trained in managing conflict. We like to think that in Christian organizations we don't have conflict because we're all nice and we all love each other and we all have the same goals. And so with that sort of idealistic concept floating around among Christians, we tend to belittle or act like conflict doesn't happen, or that it's not a problem for us, or that we're just going to forgive each other all of the time. And the reality is, one of the primary reasons that missionaries leave the field is because of team conflict. And sometimes the conflict is with the field leader. And conflict management is not a divine gift or a spiritual gift or a talent that just gets, handed down to us. It's a skill that needs to be learned and it needs to be practiced. And this is especially true in a Christian context because there's ways we're called to treat each other. So field leaders need to be really encouraged to build their conflict management skills. And then field leaders need to build team cultures that allow for healthy conflict on the field. Rules of engagement, ways that we're going to interact with each other. Here's how we disagree. And I think we can't just avoid or act like these things aren't going to happen to us.
Yeah, we did a retreat with our missionaries. Was it last year? No, it's 2 years ago. And we had one of the member care lead some of the sessions. And it was on kind of conflict resolution. And we had a little conflict that we thought was just a little thing. And no big deal, would be great for an example. So she had asked us for an example. And we said, yeah, we can use this example that we had this morning. Man, when we were in the middle of the little exercise on how do you work through conflict, it unraveled into actually this was a much deeper conflict than we realized. And there's just a lot underneath the surface that we just never addressed. And so it was really good, but it just showed me as a leader, to be more aware, to keep my eyes out. Because sometimes as the leader, you have to be the one to initiate the conflict. It's not always that other people are going to speak up if they have a difficulty with you or something. So you have to kind of be aware and notice okay, that person is acting different, or there's something there, I should press into that, and then you discover that there's a conflict and it needs to be worked on. So
or what Jen said, you have to develop the culture that people can come up, be the one to address the conflict, because sometimes that's also what they're looking for. They're like, you didn't create the space, the safe space, or the means, and so you even have to anticipate it and create something.
No, that's good. Well, the Bible talks about artificial intelligence 35 times. No, never. And it never also mentions field leaders, ironically enough. It doesn't talk about Paul having a field leader. Did he have a field leader? Was Paul the field leader? We see, the apostles going back and forth and splitting up, having their own conflicts. But Alessandro, the Bible does offer us some insights about leadership. Yeah, what things can we be inspired by that the Bible has to tell us about leadership in regards of kind of this idea of leading from the middle, or leading missionary endeavors?
Yeah, so definitely the Bible talks about leadership. For that is 100% clear, and I think everybody knows that who's read the Bible. But
just
I think
field leadership.
Just not field leadership, specifically in the aspect of being in the field. I'm assuming that's why it's called field leadership, because you're in the ground with the people. And so you are both leading the people, but at the same time, then we kind of talked about the idea of responding to someone else. And so something of the idea of taking each aspect of a field leadership of what Jan wonderfully laid out for us, we can see that that's displayed in the Bible. And then you kind of put them all together and you get a field leader. So like Paul in Acts 15:36 had planted churches already. And then with Barnabas, decided, hey, let's go back and visit the believers in the towns where we preach the word of the Lord and see how they're doing. So there's this idea of, okay, checking up on them, right? So yes, was he a field leader? Not in the sense that we understand today, but he had that mentality of, hey, I can't just let them go, sort of like set them up well, let them go and see you later. No, I need to go check on them again. So it's sort of what we've been talking about, the idea of what a field leader. And then, of course, Jesus even coming to earth has this implication that he couldn't have saved us from up top. He had to come down. And so there's this idea, not that we're saviors, but we need to be swimming in the waters of the people that we are helping. We can't just be, sending an email and listening to the people and say, okay, this is how you should resolve it. This is how you do it. So this is the idea of proximity, being there. And maybe not everyone is necessarily going to be living in the country that you are the field leader. There's or the country where the missionaries are, maybe, but they are in proximity. Maybe they're in the country, in the state over, or the region over, or the country over, that they can be there in a week's time if something needed to happen. And then, of course, there was Moses. There's Moses really being the middleman. In this case, God being the top guy, and the Israelites, the people he was leading, being the bottom people that he was speaking for them, and as well speaking for God. And we see sometimes how things went well, and sometimes things didn't go so well. There was miscommunications, and then we even saw Moses misunderstanding or not following the instructions clearly. And of course, the perfect example would be when he strikes the rock instead of just speaking to the rock. And so we see it all in the Bible. It's just what over the years, as missionaries spread out more, because in this case things were still more localized, then realizing, okay, we need someone there who can do all these things and do it well, all the qualities that Jen mentioned. And so we do see it in the Bible, and it would be worth drawing from it to see what are the things that a field leader needs to keep increasing in and improving in.
That's really good. I think, like you mentioned, there's many things that the Bible has to say on leadership, but that idea that you're explaining there is a great example. And I think that whole idea of doing missions with also comes into this. Like we want to make sure that as field leaders, we are doing missions with our team that we're leading, and with our organization that we're sent by, with our partners, with those that are funding our ministry, and also with those that we're serving alongside on the ground. And so I think that tension that we have to hold, and that tension that Paul had to hold as he was leading, and I think are all great examples. I think if I had to summarize kind of some of the key things that have come up in this conversation, it's been that idea of building bridges, like relational bridges. Field leaders have that middle role of kind of being the bridge. And also, I would say tension. There's a lot of tension being held by field leaders. That might be why I get different mouth sores and stuff. But there's just different stresses, different things pulling, and they're having to navigate and kind of be in the middle of that. So, yeah, were there any final thoughts, anything anyone wants to add before we kind of wrap up this episode?
I did like that image of Moses and the intermediary between God and the Israelites, and I think you see him both advocate, like, okay, God, please don't wipe them out, give us a break. And you see him get so mad at the Israelites, what are you crazy people doing? And I think it's reassuring to me to know that, that it's a challenge. It was challenging for Moses, and both of those things are important and valuable. And also it's hard, and just have some grace with yourselves, field leaders, and let yourselves learn and grow, and just lean into Christ as you do this hard work.
That's great. Great advice. Have grace on yourselves and lean into Christ. Appreciate those words, Jen. Well, hey, thanks for tuning in to today's episode. We hope you enjoyed the conversation, found it insightful. You need to know your ministry is important, and we hope that you consider your time with us as an investment in your work. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, And please share this podcast with your friends, partners, those you think would be interested. Until next time, keep going wherever Jesus leads you.